Hello, I'm Ed Wolfe, Central Kitsap Commissioner. It's hard for me to sit here and say this, but I've been on this job for a year now. This is my third Commissioner's Corner. Today I've looked for topics for today that impact our community, impact our families, impact our jobs, impact our environment. And to me, it's always been extremely important personally and in my capacity as a Commissioner to balance this growth with quality of life in our environment, to make sure we protect our pristine environment. Today we have a colleague for many, many years. We have Congressman Kilmer, who we've worked with on many occasions in the State House. Derek will be talking about these same issues today, or Congressman Kilmer will with regard to the quality of life and what he may be doing in Washington, D.C. It is doing in Washington, D.C. to make our lives better here in the county. And later we'll meet with the David McVicker, who is the Superintendent of CK Schools. David will talk about a bond levy, and we'll talk about what the Central Kitsap school system is doing and how we're developing the school area for our kids and for their future. So that's what we're doing today, and stay with me. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. Again, I'm Ed Wolfe, Central Kitsap Commissioner. I'm proud to present today to our community Congressman Kilmer. Congressman Kilmer, you may remember my law office was right across the street from the Norm Dix Government Center. I watched this building being built from the ground up, and here we are, you sitting in a former congressman's seat who was sitting here. So happy to have you here today and talk about what you're doing in Washington, D.C., the other Washington. But before we get there, can you share a few points about how did you get to Washington, D.C.? I'm not talking about by plane, but you're in the state Senate, you were in the state House, you went to Washington, D.C. What was the process to get you to Washington, D.C., which we were very happy you were there?
Well, first, thanks for the question, and thanks for letting me be with you. This was a bit of a circuitous route for me. I grew up in Port Angeles. My folks were school teachers out there. And when I was a kid was right around the time the timber industry took it on the chin. I was in high school when we saw mills start to go down. And it had a huge impact on me. My college experience was focused on economic development issues. I studied public policy with a real focus on economic development. And then after college and graduate school, got a job in business, mostly trying to pay off my student loans and get some experience. And then I went to work professionally in economic development in Pierce County in Tacoma. And our focus was on trying to bring more jobs into our area and trying to keep the ones we had. And I kept finding myself saying, gosh, what government does and doesn't do has a huge impact in our ability to do that. And finally, a bunch of people I knew said, you seem to have a lot of good ideas and you sure as heck complain enough. Why don't you go do something about it, pal? And the next thing I knew, I was serving in the state legislature. I spent 2 years in the state house and then 6 in the state senate, and worked primarily on economic development issues. I worked a fair amount on education issues too. And then my final 2 years in the state senate, I was one of the budget writers writing the capital budget. And March the 3rd of 2012, I got a call from Norm Dix saying, hey, in about an hour, I'm going to announce I'm not running for re-election and you should think about what you want to do. And once I regained consciousness, I called up my wife and we went out for dinner that night and had a pretty serious conversation about this. And I'll tell you, it wasn't a no-brainer for me. To me, the main reason to do it was because we got to get people back to work and get this economy moving, and I feel like I have a good background in that regard. There were 2 sticking points. One, I think Congress is a total mess right now. I mean, you don't have to watch C-SPAN to have a sense it's not functioning the way it ought to. And secondly, I got 2 little girls. I've got a 6-year-old named Tess and a 9-year-old named Sophie, and there was some acknowledgement that taking on this job required being away from them a bit. But in the end, those 2 concerns were a large part of why I did it. It's because I have 2 daughters and because it's a mess, and I care about what kind of country they grow up in, and I don't want their future dictated by a completely messed up federal government.
Well, I'll comment that Tess and Sophie, I was around before they were around, so I feel like I'm getting old.
We're all getting old.
Can you, Congressman Kilmer, just give the public some idea of the type of issues that you're working on and we'll talk about some specific veterans issues later.
Yeah.
Issues that you're working on or have been working on in Washington, D.C. that are improving the quality of life here in Kitsap County.
Yeah, there's a broad number of things that kind of fit that bill. One, a lot of my focus is on economic development, and there's a lot of things that factor into that: educational opportunity, access to basic infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, those sorts of things. So that's one category of things that we're working on. Two are those sort of fundamental issues around quality of life. So I've gotten very involved on issues related to the protection of Puget Sound and the recovery of Puget Sound, which is a very important body of water, but it's very sick. And so we're working on issues in that regard. And then third, the district I represent has one of the largest populations of military veterans in the country. So a big part of my focus is making sure that if you served our country, that we have your back and that we're doing everything we can for our military veterans. So those are kind of three categories of things that I work on. I'm happy to talk about the specifics of any of those.
If I could follow up with, as a veteran myself, follow up with something that's very important to our county, certainly in Silverdale, the whole county. That's veteran services and our military presence in Kitsap County. And you know as well as I do, it's huge in Kitsap County.
Sure.
Maybe you could talk to us about some things you're working on, or you've worked on, very successfully, I might add, with regard to veterans outpatients or outpatient services in Bremerton. And I know you and I have talked about it in this very office. Maybe you could share some of your thoughts on that.
Sure. I'll talk about that specifically, and then I'm happy to talk more broadly too. One of my priorities has been to replace and upgrade the community-based outpatient clinic here in Kitsap County, which is a means through which veterans can get access to health care. And the current facility is inadequate, both in terms of quality and in terms of capacity.
110% overcapacity.
It's a real problem. And so we've been pushing the VA to upgrade the facility. The good news is they've now contracted to get a new space that'll have substantially more space, give them the opportunity to increase their staff substantially, and as a consequence, serve more veterans, serve more patients. Now while they've contracted on a space, until that puppy opens, I'm keeping the foot on the accelerator. So we've set up regular calls with the head of the VA for the Puget Sound region, asking for updates, making sure that we're getting rid of any roadblocks to them opening the doors of that facility. But so that's that specific issue. And then more broadly, I think you're right that it's really important that we're protecting our veterans, doing everything we can to make sure we have their back. And so that manifests itself in all sorts of ways, trying to remove barriers as men and women leave the uniformed service and try to enter civilian life and enter the civilian workforce. A couple of the bills that I've sponsored have been focused on trying to remove barriers to that. So whether it be trying to add employment protections for veterans so they don't face discrimination in going into the civilian workforce. We're going to soon be introducing a bill that tries to end a prohibition. Right now, if you're in the uniformed service and if you want to enter a DoD civilian job, you have to wait 6 months. And that rule has been waived for the last few years by the administration. But that's a silly rule, because what it means is if you're in the uniformed Navy here and want to go work at the shipyard, you have to basically be unemployed for 6 months. And that doesn't serve our military well, it doesn't serve our veterans well. And then obviously a lot of what we're working on is trying to protect Naval Base Kitsap, which is both important from a national security standpoint, but also wildly important from the standpoint of our region's employment base.
And Kitsap, and Keyport.
Absolutely. These are both critical jobs and perform a critical function. So as an example, we're working on bipartisan legislation looking at the reauthorization of torpedo upgrades and torpedo renewals up at Keyport, and trying to get that into next year's defense bill. Very, very important to those jobs at Keyport. Looking at, as the federal government does military construction, having seismic upgrades at the shipyard, because we know that those are really old buildings, and we want to make sure that workforce is kept safe and that if we have an earthquake, that not only are those people safe, but those jobs are safe over the long haul. And even little things like we were successful in getting an extension of overtime pay for the folks at the shipyard when they go work over in Japan on the forward deployed carrier. When they work overtime there, they should get paid overtime. And that reauthorization had expired, and we took care of that. Right now I'm working on trying to fix how the per diem pay is awarded to the federal workforce, the DoD workforce, because the DoD changed the rules and it really sticks it to those workers right in their pocketbook, right in their wallet. And so that's something we're working on as well. But as I look at our office's sort of strategic plan, one of the main things is doing everything we can for those who are working for the Navy, doing everything we can for those in uniform, and doing everything we can for those who've left their uniform and now serving as veterans in our community.
And I would add to the public, Congressman Kilmer, that yes, you don't have 30 years like former congressman, but we very much appreciate, or I do as one commissioner, the staff in D.C., the military staff in D.C., and of course the military and non-military staff here. Your staff is just always there with us, and they make you look good.
Thanks. We got a good team.
Yeah,
I'm really proud of them.
So let's talk, if we could, about an issue that's very important to me in Central Kitsap, and one of my priorities, and that's Silverdale. It's the campus. It's the economic growth in Silverdale, and it's balancing the economic growth in Silverdale and the county with that quality of life. That the reason that Wendy, my wife, and I moved over here is because of the kayaking and because of the backpacking. What are you working on in D.C. with regard, specifically with regard to economic engines like workforce that will benefit the county in the near future, hopefully?
Sure. There's a handful of broad categories, and I'll try to break them down. One is infrastructure funding. The Congress had really kind of dropped the ball when it came to investment in infrastructure, roads and sewers and all of those sorts of things that help enable smart economic growth and smart development. And thankfully, we actually saw a highway bill pass that provides 5 years of predictable funding for counties and for local communities, so that they have some sense of whether or not road money is going to be available and transit money is going to be available. And that's something that we were really involved with. Two is all of those things under the broad umbrella of workforce development. And that starts with our youngest kids. We actually just passed a bill replacing No Child Left Behind, providing additional flexibility to our school districts and to our teachers. And within that, there was a very important provision for the Central Kitsap School District. And I know you're going to be talking to the superintendent, but the Central Kitsap School District really got it stuck to them when it came to what's called impact aid, which is the federal government's effort to, in essence, reimburse and appreciate those communities that have a lot of their land base wrapped up in federal ownership and that serve a lot of military-connected kids. And so, unfortunately, by really a stupid decision by the U.S. Department of Education, Central Kitsap School District really was put at a negative disadvantage. And thankfully, in the bill that we passed last week, we actually got language in there that gets them a chance to get that money back. And I think that's really important.
And I think the public should know, I should never interrupt a congressman.
Yeah, no,
I think the public should know that you have worked very closely with Senator Murray for quite a while on this impact fee issue.
It's a really big deal, and it's really important not just to the Central Kitsap School District, but to a whole bunch of school districts. And I really am grateful that for the partnership of Senator Murray and for the fact that we got that bill across the finish line. But the other thing I'll mention when you ask about the Central Kitsap effort, part of our role as an office, part of my role as a representative is simply to be a partner to commissioners like you, to local government officials, whether that be being a partner in trying to get access to funding from the VA or from the USDA or from the Department of Commerce or what have you, being able to support those applications for grants. Those are the types of things our office does as well.
And I was going to ask you, one of my questions later was going to be, but I'll put it out there now. What can we do, we being the county or one commissioner or three commissioners do, to work more closely on issues where we have mutual interests, our people here? Are there areas that we can work more closely on and develop that partnership, like the Silverdale Community Center?
Yeah, so I think there's actually, Kitsap County does it right. I mean, there is, I think, a very thoughtful approach to setting an agenda that moves our economy forward, protects quality of life, and that agenda feeds into stuff I work on. So when we talk about infrastructure funding for Kitsap County, some of the specific things I'm working on are in partnership with the county commission. We're working on trying to get reauthorized a federal law called the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which protects recreational areas and protects those kayaking opportunities that you mentioned. That's been a huge priority for Kitsap County, and as a consequence, it's a huge priority for me. And so I'm working on that in Congress as well. So I would say, I always say the boat moves best when all oars are in the water rowing in the same direction. And I think that's certainly something Congress could learn something from, because too often the oars are out of the water with people beating each other over the heads. But I really feel like Kitsap County, both the county government and the municipal governments here within Kitsap County really do it right. We are partners in every sense of the way, and it means your agenda is my agenda too.
Well, thank you. One of the key, I mentioned earlier, one of my key priorities is the Silverdale Community Center. You're aware of the projects. This has been going on for decades, but we're at the point now where we're actually going to demolish, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, in February we're going to demolish the Silverdale Community Center and start redeveloping that entire area all the way back. So this opens up an opportunity for Silverdale to have a heart, to have a core with paths and trails. Obviously, I'm feeling very excited about that. That's an area that I know you've looked at and we've talked about, your words, partnering with Kitsap County to make that happen. And I don't know if you have any thoughts that you can share today.
Yeah, I think, so again, broadly, it's things like looking for grant and loan opportunities so that as the county pursues projects like that, the federal government can be a funding partner, whether that be, through USDA or the Recreation Conservation Office, which is, gets a lot of federal dollars. Those sorts of funding sources, our office plays sort of a treasure hunting role. And then secondly, particularly since in an era without earmarks, one of the main roles that we play is simply supporting the county in pursuit of those funds, providing support letters and doing advocacy on behalf of the county.
We'll be back to you on that.
I know you will.
On the grants and the funding. We're working here, or I'm working, the commissioners are working on the concept of a public-private partnership within Silverdale, within the community, Silverdale campus. Very excited. Stakeholder meetings in this summer and this fall. We're moving, and no more white papers, no more focus groups. We're going to have something, a heart and a soul, I think, there.
Cool.
And we thank you for your efforts there. Do you have anything you want to add? I'm asking all the questions. Everything you want to add to what else you can do as our congressman from the 6th Congressional District, or what else can we be doing together?
Well, I mentioned at the top, I guess, a few other things that I'm working on that may be of interest to your constituents, to our collective constituents. As I'm traveling around the district, one of the main things I hear is concern about college debt. As people look down the road. Not every job requires a college education, but more and more jobs do require at least some post-secondary education. And listen, I paid for college with the help of financial aid. My folks were teachers, and so I got
both your parents were teachers.
Yeah, and so I got grants and loans, and occasionally wash dishes in the college dining room, which my wife believes is the only transferable skill I learned in college. But that is translated into some of the stuff I'm working on. So in the new year, we're going to be introducing a bill focused on trying to kind of put some of the federal financial aid programs on steroids to provide more support to families here in Kitsap County and all throughout the country. I also mentioned Puget Sound, which is, part of the reason we all live here is because this is a glorious place to live. Puget Sound is part of our quality of life here. It's part of who we are. It's part of our identity here. And yet it's a body of water that has a lot of challenges. and we're not keeping up with those challenges. So I joined our neighboring Congressman Denny Heck in forming something called the Puget Sound Recovery Caucus, where we're trying to elevate and escalate Puget Sound as an issue at the federal level. We just introduced a bill that is important in a few respects. One, it's a bipartisan bill. Every single member of the Washington State congressional delegation is a sponsor of that bill. And it tries to designate the Puget Sound as a nationally significant body of water, much like the Chesapeake Bay or the Great Lakes or Long Island Sound. And as a consequence, do a better job of having the federal agencies coordinate support to the Sound and provide additional investment in protecting the Sound. So stay tuned. There's a lot of activity on that front. We're gonna be in the new year introducing legislation providing assistance to county governments, to local governments around stormwater cleanup, which, a lot of that stormwater just goes straight into the Sound and continues the damage that we're trying to prevent. So stay tuned. There's a lot of important activity happening on that front.
I've never had a congresswoman that was a dishwasher, and you're one of the best dishwashers I've ever known. We appreciate you so much here, Congressman Kilmer. Lastly, let me ask you about some of the other, we all want to preserve and protect our quality of life here. I've said that before. And the environment, certainly the 200 plus miles of shoreline. I think we have the largest shoreline probably in the country, Kitsap County. What about other national assets that you're working on? Not necessarily in Kitsap County, but maybe Olympic National Forest.
Sure. Well, I mentioned the Land and Water Conservation Fund is a biggie, and we'll see what happens with the reauthorization of that important law. But that is a great way to protect green spaces, allow for investment in recreational areas like parks and things like that. I've also been working with a group out on the peninsula around two different efforts. One is an effort called the Wild Olympics, which is to protect within the Olympic National Forest some of the really environmentally sensitive areas and designate them as wilderness and designate some wild and scenic rivers. And the value of that is a fewfold. One, it protects those environmentally sensitive areas, but two, it drives a lot of tourist activity. So you see, the Kitsap Visitor and Convention Bureau and a lot of the other tourism agencies have a lot of enthusiasm about, because it drives more people here into our region. So that's something else that we're working on.
Elwha River, I was backpacking there recently, and I know you're helping out in that area in the national parks.
Yeah, you bet.
So it's time to close. I apologize.
Not at all.
But we've had very instructive for me, and I think for our public, the communication between your office and Kitsap County. It couldn't be any better in terms of what you're doing in our county, what your staff is helping you do in our county, and we're very fortunate to have you where you are.
Thanks.
And I'm getting the hook over there to just cut this off, so thank you very
Great
much,
to see you.
Congressman Kilmer.
Thanks. Thanks for your partnership.
Welcome back to Commissioner's Corner. I once again am still Ed Wolfe. With me I have Dave McVicker, I keep saying McVicker, our Central Kitsap School District Superintendent for how many years now?
This will be the end of the second?
Second year. We're here in Central Kitsap High School, 70 some years old. The superintendent's going to talk about the school today and the plans that you have for the school and for the students. But I want to share with the viewers at home that this is it's an old building, but it's a functional building. But you're going to tell us what you're going to do with this building. I'm familiar with CK because of the Alumni Association, because of was it the Prowl that I ran in, or the Cougar Prowl? The Cougar Prowl. So I'm somewhat familiar, but I'd like for our guests at home to understand better what is going on with Central Kitsap today, and what are the plans with regard to what's unique about Central Kitsap students, school? What's unique in terms of enrollment, demographics?
Okay. Well, let's start with what's unique about the district. We're the largest district in Kitsap County, and we have about 11,000 students. 50% of those, or slightly under, are federally connected. So they're in some way connected to either the work on the base or the shipyard, as well as being uniform enrolled in the predominantly the Navy. We do have needs across the board with our kids. Our demographics on students and their backgrounds are very similar to those around and through the county, and that's pretty much where we are as a district for background.
Superintendent McVicker, I've been reading in the paper at least the past month or two. Is something going on in terms of a bond or a levy going out to the community? Can you inform my viewers at home what this is all about and what it's going to do and why this is happening?
You bet. In 2016, our current levy, school support levy, ends, and our current capital projects levy also ends. So we have a capital measure and an operations measure that both end in 16. So we'll be back to the voters in February to replace both of those measures. The school support levy will allow us to continue the programs that we currently have in place and deliver to every student in every school the program that our community and parents are used to having, supporting music programs, library programs, technology programs, slightly lower class sizes than we have in other places, and making sure the district operates well. The big change has been the capital measure, and that's really replacing and moving into phase 2 of our long-range capital
What's phase
plan.
1?
Phase 1, we just are finishing up. We did a number of work around every building. We did some work on technology. We're all wireless in the buildings. We've just begun to go to some Chromebook laptops for students. And we completed a complete renovation and rebuild for Hawk Elementary. It's a beautiful building next to Jackson Park. And we're in the process of completing modernization for Silverdale Elementary. And then our final large project will be moving our transportation warehouse and food services up out of the CK campus where they presently are up on Dickey Road. So that's phase 1. And for about the last year, we've been working with the community, the board, the finance committee, the facilities committee to determine what goes into phase 2. The biggest single item, and over 4,000 responses in our survey a year ago about this time, and in our work with focus groups and in our updated strategic plan is safety and security. And right now in most of our buildings you can walk in the front door and you may or may not be directed somewhere. And in today's environment that's a significant issue. And Silverdale, when we finish that in the fall, will be our first building with an entrance that will be able to lock down automatically. So in the front door, once school starts, that second door in the vestibule is locked and people are directed into the office.
So that's phase 1.
That's phase 2. That's the first part.
Let's move directly to phase 3.
So phase 2 is where we're headed with the safety and security, along with impacting our 2 oldest, most needy buildings, Central Kitsap Middle School and Central Kitsap High School.
This building right here.
This building that we're in right here.
And they'll be, if the bond levy is successful, they'll be replaced.
They will be replaced, and it's actually cheaper for us to replace CK High School than it is for us to renovate it by about $15 million.
And there's no tax increase.
And is
that correct?
That is correct. The tax rate will remain the same once both of these measures are passed in February.
Okay. Very briefly, Superintendent, if you would just talk about how we can partner, probably have about 30 seconds left, how we can partner better between the county, or between the county and the school district to make this a thriving, strong, healthy community. We need the education, we need for our youth.
We have a great opportunity to redo the CK campus, CK High School, CK Middle School, connect it to the Central Kitsap Community Campus that you're working on. And we've got Linder Field across the way, and we've got lots of opportunities with paths and road connectors, bike trails.
To connect them all.
Yep.
This is so exciting. We've had 2 very important people in our community on my Commissioner's Corner today, and Derek Kilmer talked about what he's doing to protect our Puget Sound, to protect our waterways and our natural assets here in the county. And also, Congressman Kilmer, you may recall, talked about securing funds, assisting to secure funds for Central Kitsap Community Campus, one of my priorities. But lastly, and not leastly, Today we're talking with Superintendent McVicker and talking about how to continue building a strong and healthy community with our
Absolutely.
kids. And I'll just say in closing that it takes all of us meaning it takes the Congress, the federal government, it takes the superintendent, it takes the county, working together as a team. And I think we're a pretty good team.
Absolutely, I would agree.
We're working very well together. We'll continue. And I'm Ed Wolfe. This is Kitsap Commissioner's Corner. I'm happy to have you with me today and look forward to seeing you the next time.